Working is presented by Maia Strategy Group, a leading market research and strategy consulting firm, helping clients in the pet care and animal health industries navigate strategic challenges for almost 2 decades. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pet Working. I'm Peter Kenseth, Vice President and Partner at Maia Strategy Group, and I am here today with Miles Thorson, founder and CEO of Odie Pet Insurance. Super excited for our episode today. This has been a goal about a year in the making for me with Pet Working. The podcast just turned 1, and one of the main reasons I founded this podcast was to promote responsible pet ownership and broader discussion of pet insurance, both within the industry and for the everyday pet parent, because I feel like it's one of those things that there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around. Unsurprisingly, insurance is not the easiest topic to understand. But in addition to leading our company's animal health and pet care practice, I also do our finance and insurance practice. So this hits a really nice sweet spot for me, and it's a topic that I love talking about. And I'm happy to have somebody who is in the weeds of the industry on the operational side and the underwriting side and the actuarial side, joining me today to kind of help break down what is pet insurance, why should you have it, what are the common misunderstandings about pet insurance in the marketplace, how can you kind of make sure that you're getting the coverage that you want for your pet, and I think we're going to get into a discussion of why you should have pet insurance and why I think, and hopefully we can convince more people to come around to the view that it is something that the majority of pet owners should have. So Miles, thanks so much. Welcome to Pet Working. Super happy to have you on today, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up. Excited.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you on. And so Odie is relatively new to the pet insurance space. I mean, pet insurance, as a product in and of itself, it isn't that old. Or I like to tell myself that because my first project in pet care and animal health was in pet insurance, and that was back in 2009. It was a fairly nascent industry, and we were looking for one of our clients in the pet food manufacturing space, actually, that was considering adding a pet insurance offering to their portfolio. So we went out and surveyed the market, and I think back then, Hartsville, ASPCA, companies that are still around, we're kind of defining the space, but a lot of the brands that we know and hold synonymous with pet insurance today, the Trupanions, Pets Best, Nationwides, they weren't really in the space. So I think, part of the reason that pet insurance isn't broadly adopted is a lot of people don't know about it. People who do know about it don't always understand it or have been fed some misinformation about it. And so I think, it is one of those things where we want to break down, those misconceptions. And I know you guys have taken a sort of novel track, really focusing more on the employee benefits space as a means of distribution, and then also doing some white labeling, but not necessarily, selling through the more traditional channels that pet insurance has been distributed through. Can you talk a little bit about, your background, how you founded the company, and why you've taken this strategy?
Yeah, no, I appreciate all the knowledge base that you already possess. So I love chatting with other people that are impassioned about the industry, and to your point, see the value proposition of the product. So to your point earlier, it's still a very new product, especially compared to other lines of business in our industry. I have a pretty extensive background in specialty insurance lines, and it wasn't something that was even on my radar until a few years ago when we started, looking at Odie. Now, I think the interesting part is once the line of business became on our radar, we got super excited by it, and felt it was something that we could come to market with some differentiation, spread awareness. Really, the main goal of Odie is to grow the entire pool of insureds here in the U.S., not just go out and compete for market share against the existing players. And it's something that my wife and I sort of in parallel, we're looking at pet insurance for our own two dogs. And like I said, just felt underwhelmed by some of the existing brands and products and price points and things like that were in the market. And just at a very high level, felt that there was a lot of opportunity here. And so, we've always had a background in identifying niche markets, niche, specialty lines of business, and certainly have that underwriting cap and a lot of product development, I guess, experience. And so that was kind of how we started developing Odie. It wasn't just, hey, we want to put a nice kind of user experience around an existing product and see if we can go sell policies through some of the existing channels. We really wanted to do something that was differentiated, innovative. Insurance is a regulated financial line of business, and it's tough to revolutionize it overnight. But I think we're making some good strides, and I think we have our eye on some future innovations and some things that can be really impactful to the industry.
Yeah, no, you touched on a lot there, Miles. And I want to kind of break that down step by step for people. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are surprised about, after learning about pet insurance, is that it's underwritten as P&C insurance, so property and casualty. Um, Pets are regarded within the eyes of the law in the United States as property, and so we're in this weird spot where we are underwriting what is medical insurance as property and casualty insurance.
Right.
So you are insuring your pet in the same way that you would insure your car or your home or your boat or your
Yeah.
motorcycle, or I don't know any of the other specialty lines that you've
Yeah.
dabbled into, but if you want to insure something, there's probably a product for you to be able to do that in the United States, and we're not as insurance intensive as a country like the UK, where they have insurance for just about everything. Um, I think it's kind of instructive that we have laws that mandate that people have health insurance, but yet we don't have full health insurance
Right.
adoption in this country. Um, we have laws that require people to have auto insurance, and yet you have uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage written into your policy for the people that are going to skirt that law. So not everybody buys into the concept of insurance in this country.
Mhm.
Um, but that being said, I think there are a lot of benefits. When you think about it, common sense tells you it's probably better to pay a little bit of money up front than to be faced with a situation where you are looking at financial because you didn't have car insurance or you didn't have home insurance, or in the case of your pet, where you're faced with a decision between keeping your pet alive or having to engage in what the industry terms economic or financial euthanasia because you don't have the money to pay for their care.
Right.
I'm curious, what did you see? You mentioned you have the product development background, and so along the lines, the reason I bring up the P&C insurance is that when you are introducing a new insurance product, you've got to go through the actuarial tables. You've got to show the
Mhm.
justification why you're underwriting a product a certain way, and then you have to go and register it with the DOI in each of the 50 different states. What did you see? You were so underwhelmed current
Yeah.
offerings in the market. What were the big gaps that you saw, and what did you try to
Yeah.
design and put into Odie to make it different?
Yeah. Well, first off, you're couldn't be more right in that you were quite literally dealing with 50 state departments of insurance to go get some of these coverage forms and pricing methodologies approved, and they all have different inputs and tweaks and sort of based on what's going on in the market, what's going on in competitors' performance, your own background as underwriters or as an insurance company, and all of that plays a factor. So it's a bit of a bear to wrestle, with all these different individual states, and I think that in and of itself is kind of a unique thing that I think gets overlooked certainly even compared to countries like the UK and things like that, where it's a bit more standardized across the board. And I think, there's been some competitors even that have probably, undervalued the challenge of some of these different state filings and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, when we were looking at the industry, we had the benefit of coming into the market where, again, the line of business certainly I wouldn't say was mature, but it was more mature than it was when it first launched, right? So people were starting to understand, okay, how are we going to price this out? What is the right language to tackle, pre-existing conditions? What are we going to cover? What are we not going to cover? So we did benefit, I think, from timing of some of the other folks that have been in the industry a bit longer, some of their learnings and all that good stuff. But really, what we found is, and this is it's a bit nuanced here, so bear with me, but I really felt that the distribution of the pet insurance product that was in the market by large in part to date was actually directly contributing to kind of the product structure, pricing, et cetera, as well. So number one, when we were looking, I felt that the entry point to pricing for a large sector of Americans was a bit high. When you start talking about north of $100 a month, I think there's sort of this math equation that people start doing of, okay, if I have the insurance for 6-7 years, I'm going to pay a few $1,000s. And if I only have a $5,000 emergency, it's not great value. So we'll get to that in a second. But I think with everyone sort of historically going predominantly direct to consumer through Google paid search and Facebook ads and things like that, it promoted this very top heavy coverage product, right? So think of a Trupanion that has an unlimited annual reimbursement rate and not a lot of flexibility within that, and that's sort of that higher end price point. If you're spending hundreds of dollars to acquire a customer through digital marketing channels, you are going to want to present a more premium type product, right, to sort of recoup the expenses there. So we felt, number one, there was opportunity to lower the entry point, not only with slightly better rates, but also just generally more flexibility with coverage products. So if you're a 23-year-old first job in New York City and you adopt a pet, you're probably not going to even consider insurance if it starts at $100 a month and goes north of there. Now, you might be able to afford $19 a month, $29 a month, and understand that you're not going to maybe get unlimited annual reimbursements, but you might get up to $10,000. And you then can prioritize, if I need prescription coverage or if I want to back that out for the savings, if I want to add a routine care plan or not. And so giving people that flexibility was I think, something that was important for us. Sort of back to our distribution, we feel that you mentioned employee benefits as a channel that we're focused on, which is true. Also focused on some other, insurtech partnerships and now getting more into the sort of, I'll say, tech-enabled pet services and preventative care and things like that. But we feel that some of these distribution channels actually more proactively put the product in front of people when they're making other financial decisions. They're making other decisions around, their own health insurance or dental and vision or whatever's offered through their employer. And we felt that was also a great way to, like I said, more proactively promote the product instead of sort of waiting for a pet to start to age or show signs of potentially an illness or something like that, which is by large in part kind of what triggers people to then start searching for pet insurance. And by then it's really too late. Either I think in the current marketplace, a lot of those prior health issues are going to be deemed as pre-existing conditions. So again, the value proposition as to why you're searching for insurance is kind of thrown out the window. The health event that you're looking to solve for is not going to be covered. And I think in the old days, there was maybe some lack of either understanding or some of the carriers would probably just end up paying these claims, which eventually drove up loss ratios, which of course drives up price. And so that's kind of where we felt, again, that the product in the marketplace and how it was being distributed were kind of hand in glove. And so we wanted to try to, find a more efficient way.
So you mentioned, the idea that pre-existing conditions, and I think it's important for people to know. I think that's probably one of the biggest sources of misinformation out there is that people don't read the coverage. They don't understand
Right.
what the policy, is going to cover, what it's not going to cover. Um, and I would guess, if you don't have, a good broker educating people on what they're signing for in the employee benefits channel, you can get a lot of people that are like, oh, great, I have pet insurance now. And then they go and they file a claim, and it's something that their pet has already been seen for. It's on their medical record, and, the claim is denied. And then you get people who are out there, well, I tried pet insurance and I submitted a claim and it was denied, and that
But it
doesn't
didn't
work.
work.
And
Right. Yeah.
um, that being said, I look at the and what I'm curious with the employee benefits channel and steps that you're taking because to circumvent that, because for my money, the best place, because of the pre-existing condition, the best place to sign up new clients is either when they're puppies or
Mhm.
when you're adopting them and they don't have a medical record. You go and you know
Yeah.
um, sign up for pet insurance, take them to the vet, do that initial wellness check, but make sure that they're covered before you bring them in and anything else is discovered. It's sort of this,
Yeah.
ground zero basis. And then the flip side of that, and I think this is where, the market's really limited. And I think, what you said is very smart. You're not necessarily competing with other carriers at this point. I mean, we've got 4% adoption,
Right.
you know, give or take in the US for dogs, I think. So there are 96% of dogs out there that don't
Right.
have pet insurance. So, it's not a place where you're competing for share at this point. But that being said, eventually I think we're going to have to get to this point where carriers are competing on the
Mhm.
basis of rate and coverage. Um, and as of right now, I don't know that there is any provider out there that is willing to say, okay, I will cover, pre-existing condition is defined as something that you had before you had pet insurance. Because I
Right.
don't, I've had Peony for 7.5 years, and
Right.
I got Pets Best when we signed up. When we got her, that was the best rate, best coverage, and they've been great. Um, but I can't, they haven't given me a reason to switch. But
Mhm.
even if they did, I wouldn't be able to do it because there's not another carrier that is going to take on my 9.5-year-old dog and cover everything
Right.
that she's been seen for in the 7.5 years that I've had her. So I guess it's a two-part question, Miles. How in the employee benefits channel are you addressing that issue of, you're going to get people who are signing up with 5-year-old dogs, 6-year-old
Mhm.
dogs, 10-year-old dogs? Are you discouraging them from signing up, or are you able to make exceptions to pre-existing conditions
Yeah.
within the employee benefits channel? And do you see there being a point in time where you could convert from other carriers and say, you know what, we'll cover you for
Right.
everything, for the period that you were insured?
Yeah, I mean, listen, so again, with what's happening in the marketplace right now, you see a lot of competitors taking pretty significant rate increases, kind of in the obvious states that you'd expect, California, New York, Florida, Texas, et cetera, really where the larger populations lie. And so pricing, I think maybe a couple of years ago it was less important, but pricing is actually starting to become a topic of concern for pet parents, right? So cost of inflation driving up vet care, which of course is driving up, to some extent loss ratios with these insurers, and that's why they're taking the rate. So to your point, being locked into one brand for the lifespan of your pet is becoming probably less and less doable, or certainly there's going to be value to wanting to shop around just like you do for other lines of insurance. And so, ultimately competition is, I think, always good for a market, and it always benefits the consumer. And so I'm in favor of it. I think to directly answer the questions that you were talking about, yeah, there's punishing somebody for changing from one carrier to another, I don't think is the right way to view this coverage. Something that we've looked at and sort of I try to borrow from other specialty lines that we have experience in. And for a number of years, our family ran a medical malpractice insurance group. And when you talk about some of these professional liability lines, there's something called retroactive date, which to your point is basically at what point in time did you have coverage with another provider. And so sort of borrowing some of these other, commercial practices and things like that, I think, and applying them to pet, I think we have a lot of opportunity, especially within the group space, to say, hey, if you guys as a company have been offering, nationwide or whatever provider they've been working with, and pricing's gone up or, whatever the case may be, I think Odie coming in and saying, listen, we're going to give you more affordable rates, more coverage flexibility, and not punish you for switching, i.e., any health event that occurred after your effective date with that other provider, we're going to go ahead and not deem that as pre-existing. I think is a huge value proposition, something that we've selectively done with some large groups. I think generally speaking, that's kind of where the industry needs to head, to encourage that competition and allow people to move between carriers. I think is going to be very important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's super interesting because I haven't heard of any other carriers doing it to date. But like you said, when you look at it, it's one of the huge inefficiencies of the model is that, you know, you, I mean, and why I'm kind of surprised where, you're saying, some of the other firms have such high entry points. And certainly, yeah, they have a huge customer acquisition cost if they're engaging in direct marketing and things like that. But at the same time, they are getting ostensibly a customer for life.
Mhm.
And, that payback rates go up every year. And it makes
Right.
sense. I understand why,
Right.
the older your dog gets, the more likely it is that they're going to go and see the vet. So yeah, it sort of works the opposite of car insurance, where the older you get, the hopefully the better driver you become, and
Right. Right.
your rates go down. But with
Yeah.
Pat, it goes up. Those are just the actuarial tables. But nobody's really innovating to try to say, you know, it's just this sort of standard progression, and
Mhm.
I haven't seen any. When I think of like the pet care, animal health industry, more often than not, it mirrors what's happening in the human nutrition
Correct.
world, the human
Yeah.
healthcare world. And, from a human healthcare to pet healthcare analog, like I would hope that eventually we're going to get to a point where pet insurance is kind of working with care providers, working with
Mhm.
pharmaceutical companies, working with animal health companies, device manufacturers to kind of keep cost control on those devices, provide a better standard of care for animals, and use creative thinking to come up with new actuarial
Mhm.
models, creative product development to give a better product. If
Yeah.
we think about like life insurance, it was a huge breakthrough like 10 years ago where life insurance companies started to use the data from your wearables, or
Mhm.
you know if you could provide evidence that you'd run in a certain number of 5Ks, or that you were
Right.
physically active to a given extent, you could get a more preferred rate on your life insurance. Similar, what I would hope at some point you're already thinking about this, that
Yeah.
there might be a thing of like, oh well, you give your dog anti-aging supplements,
Mhm.
you're checking the boxes in terms of your preventives each month. um you know we see that this supplement as being fundamental to health and well-being and preventing arthritis in dogs. So um I would hope, and in the future we might, companies maybe like Odie doing
Yeah.
out, that those actuarial tables, bringing it to the DOI,
Right.
engaging in that product development side of the business, and creating some new and differentiated offerings. Is that on your roadmap at all?
100%. Yeah. So, you mentioned sort of the progression of rates as the pets age. That's what we call a age factor, right? So there's the breed of the pet, age of the pet. Obviously where you lived kind of determines to roughly kind of cost of expected care. New York City is certainly going to be more expensive to go into a vet office than Omaha would be. But I think so. I think those age factors are always going to be important, right? I mean, to a 6-year-old pet that's sort of aging is going to have more likelihood of developing chronic issues, diseases, et cetera, versus the brand new puppy or kitten. That said, we've seen other folks in the space taking large rate increases to their base rate, to which then these factors get applied, right? So it's not necessarily that they're increasing their rate, for 6-year-old pets and 9-year-old pets and things like that. Their base rate is what's going up, and then these trend factors and other factors get applied to it. So clearly something's happening from the underwriting side and the performance of these books of business to drive that. And so when we were looking at the space, by large in part, we felt that this was going to be sort of a two-phased rollout, if you will. Number one, more efficient distribution, not fall victim to these skyrocketing cost of digital marketing and things like that, which will indirectly, have us try to charge higher rates to support that. So our sort of B2B distribution through the employee benefits channels and some of these other partnerships that we're focused on, I think, is a good first step in proactively putting the product in front of people, acquiring customers more efficiently, more effectively. It helps us keep our rates lower. In terms of actually directly impacting animal health and driving better outcomes is kind of phase two. And so, we have a phenomenal chief product officer who's a PhD in animal health and science and comes from the human healthcare and health tech background as well. So it was really important to bring that knowledge base into our organization that already has sort of historical insurance, underwriting background and product development from that sense, really blend that with the animal health expertise. And so, we've seen really core factors like what foods your dogs and cats are eating, to your point around, preventative supplements being used, other just healthy habits, fitness activity, going in for general checkups on a certain cadence. And so we have a good sense of what actually does impact animal health and improves outcomes. And so it's now being able to, number one, give our clients access to this knowledge base, and give them access to potentially the right products and service providers. So, integrating with telehealth partnerships right now is again a great first step to provide people with sort of that first line of defense of, hey, this is happening with my pet. Do I need to go into the vet office or not? That's a phenomenal way to potentially keep people out of the vet office instead of having $1,000 weekend emergency visit that was unnecessary. Starting to use these experts to provide nutritional planning is also, I think, a great first step and something that you can do through that telehealth interaction. Rolling out partnerships again with the right food companies, with the right supplement vendors is something that we're currently working on. It's a bit early days. We really want to spend, if we're going to actively promote a specific product, we want to make sure it's actually going to drive the health outcomes that we'd like to see. But that's definitely on the roadmap and something that we're working hard on. And over time, absolutely see a group like ourselves directly, changing rate or providing additional coverage that maybe wasn't previously available. If our pet parents can demonstrate that they're using these tools that we're trying to make available to them. So it's a bit, again, something that I think we need to be as the insurer, as the willing payer, for animal care. We need to do a better job of educating people and putting these products in front of them, and trying to encourage these behaviors with the financial incentive potentially of better rates or whatever the case may be.
Um, I mean, the possibilities when you think about it are endless, and it's super exciting to hear you actively like considering partnerships with nutrition companies, to be able to say, okay, we believe in the quality of this pet food, to such an extent that we actually think it's going to drop better health outcomes for your
Right.
dog. And this isn't unheard of. I mean, I hate having to
No,
keep
sorry to
comparing
interrupt,
dogs
but
to cars.
yeah, no, it's and from our background, that's kind of the I guess the chuckle is this is happening in all other lines of insurance, right? Underwriters are constantly finding ways to manage risk, mitigate risk, or even prevent risk, or prevent exposures from happening. So it's just about taking some of those other examples that some of them work better than others, but bringing that, I think, expertise, that knowledge base into this sort of I'll say pet insurance is almost like a teenager line of business right now in the US, and it's starting to mature, and I think we're on a good track to really start to innovate and kind of roll out some of these new features.
I mean, at the core, you're exactly right. I mean, it's just a means of acquiring preferred risk, right? It's the same way, Liberty Mutual has discounted rates for Volvo drivers. They believe
Right.
in, that Volvo has, onboard safety systems that are among the best in the industry. They believe that, the people who choose to drive Volvo are going to be more safety conscious drivers. And, you know, clearly that bet's paying off for them because they continue to invest in the program.
Right.
They continue to go after that market. Similarly, if you decide you want um, dogs that are eating a certain diet, do out your actuarial tables, bring it to the DOI, prove it from a product development perspective, and there you go. And like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, using the life
Yeah.
insurance corollary, we've seen wearables are increasingly making their way into the pet space.
Mhm.
We did an episode here on pet working with Invoxia a few months back,
Okay.
and I have Peony wearing the Invoxia collar now, and so we have her heart rate data and her respiratory
Yep.
rate signature, and theoretically, for my money, that probably makes her a more attractive dog to
Right.
insure than a dog who you don't have that data on. And if you can
Yeah.
see that, like, look, I've got years of data of right now, but you know, look, she's got good heart rate, good respiratory
Yeah.
rate. She goes to the vet regularly. That probably makes her a more attractive dog to insure
Yeah.
than the dog that you don't have the data on.
100% right. And I think what people tend to overlook when just insurance in general is if you're an actuary looking at some of these different data sets, you really kind of look at 5 to potentially 10 years worth of information before you really start to allow that to impact your underwriting decisions. And so to your point, it's going to take some time, but there's the technologies and the products are now there to allow us to start to collect this data and actually prove out some of these ideas. And I'll just give you kind of just two quick examples of two things that we're working on and just I find it interesting. First, we're doing a small pilot partnership with a genetic testing lab, again, where we can do a quick swab of a dog or cat and actually get the sort of the biological age of the pet versus their actual age and determine, okay, why is this cohort of pets, biologically younger than these others? And then we can start to triangulate, foods, activities, other factors. So that's super important. And else that we saw early on, cost of prescription medications, just as an example. Again, the exact number off the top of my head was in the ballpark of 20% of the overall pet insurance rate, right? For a lot of our competitors that we analyzed. So that right off the top, is a huge opportunity to demonstrate that, if we can control those expected costs, we can then impact the rate, by double digits. And so integrating, a group like ourselves integrating with some online pharmacy and retail providers, providing a really tight user experience where, if you have the prescription coverage, you can actually just get it redeemed, potentially through a pharmacy integration that we have, and not even have to come out of pocket, right? Because we have the insurance on hand to then cover the expenses of that checkout. I think number one is a really, really convenient, thing for pet parents. And number two, benefits us as the insurer, right, to control those claims costs, which ultimately gets passed down to the customer in the form of, base rate savings and things like that. So there's, I think, a lot of different things that maybe in and of themselves start to impact things in single digits or low double digits, but more holistically start to actually really change the product and change sort of the pricing dynamics.
Yeah. And you raise another huge kind of, I don't want to say barrier, but it can be an inconvenience for some people, when it comes to adoption. If everything has to come out of pocket, and you are having to put a $5,000 vet bill on your credit card for a sizable portion of the population, that's not necessarily doable.
Right.
So even if you have the pet insurance and it's going to get reimbursed,
Yeah.
running that money out of pocket can be a challenge for some people. And we've talked with different crowdfunding organizations. We've had Connection Point and Pet Funder on here, to talk about potential solutions to stem those challenges. And but that can be a big thing. And
Yeah.
the other half of that is you don't necessarily know that it's going to get reimbursed. It's not like
Right.
human health insurance where you have to get pre-authorization to go get an
Right.
MRI. It's like your vet recommends that you get an MRI, and
Right.
you front the money for that, and then you get the denial, and it's like, oh boy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and
Just real
obviously
quick
not
on
as
that topic. I think a Trupanion is a great example of somebody that's really invested a lot into more direct integrations with vet offices, and I think logically that makes a lot of sense. As a startup, coming into the business a couple years ago, we certainly weren't going to have the budget, time, bandwidth to go kind of try to replicate that or compete with Trupanion in that vertical. So we had to look at, again, alternative means of distribution, and that's worked out well for us. But I think from a technology perspective, until very recently, some of the integrations with the vet offices in terms of looking at medical records, looking at treatment notes, being able to receive sort of uploaded invoices in real time from vets to then make a quick claims decision as yes, this would be approved, or no, this would not be approved. I think again until very recently was unlikely or almost impossible. Now with a lot of these large language models and the chat GPT type technologies of the world, I think there's a real possibility in the near future of us starting to overlaying some of those automations, so that we can actually connect with vet offices and provide that transparency that everyone's looking for. And so I think there's going to be a lot of innovation on that front as well in our industry, coming down the road, and something that we're excited about.
Yeah. And I always say, to me, it is baffling. I understand why you're targeting the employee benefits thing, but it's always baffling to me that more vets aren't involved in the distribution of pet insurance. And I know they're theoretically not able to because they're not licensed brokers, and they can't be discussing specific coverages and rates for
There's plenty
individual
of
pets.
above board ways to go about it, to educate the customer and have, a sort of an insurance presence in the office, whether it's, physical presence, or more of a digital presence. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, we know that when a vet has a certain percentage of their client base that has insurance, ultimately their care revenue goes up because people are not forced to make that emotional decision of, do I give my pet the care that I want to give it, or do I have to sort of protect my finances? And, you mentioned something early on the call just about, obviously the financial value that pet insurance brings in hedging this risk. But I think there's a huge, I'll say emotional value that goes into it as well, in terms of, um, maybe I was diligent, maybe I set aside some funds, every year for my pet in case of emergency. But when push comes to shove, number one, am I actually going to, allocate those funds to this? And number two, think of that emotional burden of having to make that decision. So when you have pet insurance, that stress goes away. It's, if it's covered, take care of it, and
It's not your money.
made.
It's not,
Right.
and I say this to people all the time, because I'll talk to friends who are financial advisors, and they'll make that argument of, that you alluded to earlier of, oh, if you paid in, $6,000 in pet insurance over the course of the life of your pet, and, why wouldn't you just, put $5,000 into, an emergency fund and let it grow in interest? And, I make that same argument of like, okay, but when it actually comes down to it, it's your money that you're having to make the decision
Right.
of, do I, yeah, it's earmarked, it's set aside, but it is still money that you have access to.
It's a stressful
And
decision to have to make. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I always say we would never let our kids be uninsured. And so many people, talk about their pets as their babies or their pets as
Mhm.
members of the family. You wouldn't do it to any other family member. And the idea of economic euthanasia is just a really hard concept for
Yeah.
me,
And it's
because
and
it's
it's a
like,
reality. Yeah.
why do you want to make a financial decision about your pet's health?
Right.
Um, and pet insurance prevents that. So no, I
Yeah.
think it 100%, for just the peace of mind and emotional security in and of itself.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's one aspect of us as insurers, getting more connected with the vet offices, both I think from distribution in the right way, obviously, above board, and making sure that it's just highly educational so that people know exactly what they're getting or not. It's more connectivity on the claims side, faster reimbursements, more transparency around, pre-approvals, or, I think that's all great and very achievable. I think, but it is a bit of a two-way road. And, I do think that us as sort of the financial players in a very emotional space, and dealing with people's pets, sort of sometimes get painted as the bad guys, holding on, clutching the purse strings, if you will. But I think the vet industry also kind of needs to work with us in concert, right? To find ways to mitigate, certain claims costs, or pre-negotiate rates, or whatever the case may be. And we have a huge opportunity because we're not regulated like human insurance, where I think it just takes the right people coming to the table and starting to cut deals that make macro financial sense for everybody. I think if you could show a vet office and a vet group that, listen, maybe in some examples your per customer expense or revenue, might be capped or might go down a bit, but as a client base, your revenue is going to go up because the fringe person that was on the fence between being able to spend $3,000 or $5,000 on a health event, now that's not a decision. It's green lit. I think there's a right math equation to make it work for everybody. And that's something I'm really not right now seeing in our space. I think I've been lucky enough. I've sat on some panels at different pet conferences and veterinary care conferences, and we always get a lot of the questions as to what can insurers do more. And I try to then put it sort of back, saying, well, again, what can the vet providers do more so that we can work together? And ultimately, we all want the same thing. We want the pets to get the care that they deserve.
It's a very simple triangulation where there's a share between the pet owner, the insurance company, and the vet, right?
Right.
We want as much time with our pets as possible. As an insurer, you want the pet to live as long as possible because that's more premiums that you're going to
Right.
collect. And as a vet, the longer that pet is alive, the more times you're going to see them, and increasingly towards the end of their life. If they have the insurance, that's going, to incentivize the pet owner to bring them to the vet more often, to get them the care
Mhm.
that they deserve,
That's right.
which is, it's a self-fulfilling cycle.
It's a feedback loop. Yeah.
And yeah, I know we're almost at time here, Miles, but to that end, the last thing I kind of wanted to touch on, and I don't know if you guys are doing it already, but yeah, it struck a chord with me when you were talking about the epigenetics testing that you're doing. Um, you know, there's also from an ecosystem perspective, the potential for insurance companies to partner with animal health companies, with pet nutrition companies, the industry as a whole, I think is just going to become more and more focused on tailored nutrition,
Yeah.
science driven, um, and everybody's looking for sources of data,
Yeah.
and if whether that's from pet DNA companies or whether it's from activity
Yeah.
trackers or vet records, but you're sort of there at the nexus of all of that because you're seeing all the vet records,
Mhm.
you're doing your own testing, um, you're interested in the data too. And if my work in insurance has taught me anything, it's that the more data you have, the more models you can
Yeah.
create, and the more creative coverages that you have. But on the flip side of that, sharing that data with the pet nutrition companies can give them, or pharmaceutical manufacturers, or anybody in the industry, can give them a leg up in their product development as well. So
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see more and more of those partnerships coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, but at the end of the day, as a willing payer for vet care and pet, pet health activities, I think we can be very impactful with how and where we start to drive our consumer traffic, to start to affect some of these behavioral changes and ultimately drive better health outcomes. So I think we have a huge opportunity to start to educate people, provide them with tools and resources to ultimately live a longer, healthier life with their pet. And in that example, everybody wins. So it's a bit of a heavy lift, but we're excited to try and tackle it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But I think we're on the cusp of an exciting time. From perspective of advances in veterinary medicine, nutrition, therapeutics. It's all right there, and I think that the closing piece of the ecosystem is driving up that level of pet insurance adoption to ensure that we do get to spend more time with our pets, that they can take full exciting developments that are emerging in the veterinary medicine space. So, Miles, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So, you've got your hands full with a newborn and on top of running a company. So we really
Yeah.
appreciate
Two
you taking the
newborns.
time to share your insights.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Two?
No, well, Odie as a startup, being the firstborn, and now
Oh,
the little guy. So yeah, no, I appreciate it. No, this
I was
is
going to say, if I missed that you had twins, I'm sorry.
so, bad joke. No, always enjoyable and productive to chat with people that really know the space and again are passionate about their pets, and that's why we got into the space in the first place. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And look forward to seeing you guys continue to push the envelope and drive innovation in the insurance space. Miles Thorson with Odie Pet, everyone. And this is Peter Kenseth with Pet Working. Appreciate you taking the time to listen today, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Pet Working is presented by Maia Strategy Group, a leading market research and strategy consulting firm, helping clients in the pet care and animal health industries navigate strategic challenges for almost 2 decades.